Today's parents are often overwhelmed by the incredible amount of information that keeps coming at them in the area of science and technology and engineering. And my guest today is going to be giving us a huge amount of information that's going to be really encouraging for those of you who are raising children who may or even may not seem to have an interest in these areas. Robert Walsh is the founder of Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy. He's a former mathematics teacher who's also worked as an IT director, a trainer, a programmer, a software tester, and a technical writer. He's a business owner, and I met him out on the road at a homeschool conference. And I think this information is going to be really important for you. If you've got a budding scientist in your house, or if you're a parent who's overwhelmed by all the technology you see, but you know your children need to be exposed to it, this is going to be a great conversation for you to hear. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. I want to give a big shout out to the prime sponsors of the Heidi St. John podcast. The podcast is being sponsored in part by the Functional Medical Institute. You guys know Dr. Mark Sherwood very well. He's been on my show lots of times over the years. And he and his wife, Michelle, are the owners of the Functional Medical Institute out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I love these guys. And no matter where you live, you can visit the Functional Medical Institute online today and connect with Drs. Mark and Michelle and start feeling better. You can go to sherwood.tv/Heidi and find out all the information that you need and get connected with the Sherwoods. You can also see some of my favorite items that I've talked about quite a bit with Mark on the show over the years. So be sure and use the coupon code Heidi when you get to checkout for 15% off your entire purchase. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Before I jump in with my guest, I want to remind you that I'm going to be very quickly in Sturbridge, Massachusetts for the Mass Hope Conference. You guys, I cannot say enough really good things about homeschool conferences. If you're anywhere in the area, Sturbridge, Massachusetts, or any of the other places that I will be, these homeschool conferences are life-giving. And Robert Walsh, who is my guest today, is going to be showing up at several events that I will be at. He will be in Pigeon Forge, and he'll also be at Branson with me for the Teach Them Diligently conference. These are great opportunities for you guys to check out what is on the market that will help you give your kids an excellent education and expose them to ideas that you may not feel qualified to teach. I love this conversation with Robert Walsh, the founder of the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy, and I think you're going to love it too. So Robert, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
So this is interesting. You know, you and I are having this conversation, offline and talking about what you do and STEM Academy and all this. And I said, I'm looking for a hook, right? I'm looking for a hook. I want parents who are listening to this to really be interested. And you started talking about, and Melissa did too, about how parents are so often overwhelmed, right, by the sciences, STEM in particular, because it seems a little bit more nebulous, I think, to parents, this idea of, technology and engineering. And you talk to, your average homeschool mom, like, Heidi St. John. I could just put my name in there. And you can almost see their eyes glaze over. And I think sometimes we're missing really important opportunities and maybe missing out in seeing things in our children that we could go, oh, we've got a kid who's going to be bent toward this. So I want to start out a little bit. I love to talk about my guests. So let's talk about you, Robert. Tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of where this passion comes from.
Yeah, sure. So I have a bachelor's degree in secondary math education. I taught in the public schools many, many years ago, but only for a very brief time. I taught middle school math for about 3 years.
Back when they were still teaching math?
They were, yeah, for the most part, we were still teaching math. But what was really interesting was at the time, the controversy was whether we should allow kids to use calculators in the classroom.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So this was the early 1990s. Yeah. So It was a long time ago, and things have definitely changed since then. But I realized that even then there was a lot of not teaching in teaching. And I'm passionate about what I do. I want the kids to be the best mathematicians ever. And there was so much else that you had to do. And so many distractions and so on. So I got a little burned out. And so I went off and did computer programming, at an electronics company for a little while. and then had the opportunity with some of the people I worked with there to start a business that was a computer programming business. And we created applications that were used in public libraries. And these were the kinds of things that you use self-service. So self-service checkout, time management. Again, this was the middle 1990s, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were giving away computers to public libraries. And the libraries were happy to have them, but it created all these issues because now they have to police the PCs,
right,
and manage the time and all this stuff. And you'd be surprised at the stories we heard about, there's a fist fight over who's going to be the next person on the computer. So, so we actually developed an application to do that automatically so that the librarians didn't have to get involved. We did an application that allowed you to print documents while you're there in the library. You've probably used these, and then you had to pay your 25 cents or whatever when you went to print it out. So we did all sorts of applications like that. And I did that for about maybe 11 years or so. And then my role in the organization changed. We were a startup at the beginning, and I was hands-on in everything. And then after, we grew and we were successful, my role changed to sort of more of the corner office CEO, and I didn't get to do the work as much. I was managing more and involved with lawyers and accountants and things. I really did. So I decided to go off and start a consulting company and do some contract programming. And I still work even now, and it's been like 10 years since I left that company. I still work for that company as a contractor. So I got to sort of get my old role back and get to work in the code again. But about 5 years ago, my own kids were starting to get old enough that they were thinking about college, and I realized neither of them had any interest in technology. And I thought that's very strange because that's what I do. Why do they not want to do what I do? And we sent our kids, we didn't homeschool them, but we sent them to a private school, and they got a very, very good but very classical education. They did not have opportunities to study computer science or engineering or robotics or any of those things because the school was too small. They didn't have the specialist teachers that were necessary for that. So that's when it sort of dawned on me that how you choose to give your child an education, whether it be public school, private school, or homeschool, that's going to dictate what opportunities your kids have. And opportunities often shape future interests. And so if you don't give the kids the opportunities, they're not going to be interested in those kinds of things. And so that's what sort of inspired me to get started in what I do now, because this is the perfect blend. I have a background in education. I know technology. I can do small business. I can blend all that together. And so now what I try to do is inspire kids to want to do technology or engineering. But even if they don't, help prepare them with the digital skills they need and other important 21st century skills like problem solving and logical reasoning that you just get by doing technical type projects, but which you can apply in non-technical contexts later in life.
That's awesome. And I had Mike Ferris on the show a couple of days ago. I mean, Mike is a legend in the homeschool world, of course, the founder of HSLDA and just on and on and on. And we were talking about what is really the responsibility of homeschool parents. And he was saying, listen, you want mastery in basically 3 subjects, right? Reading and writing and math is what you want them to master. But everything else is about exposure. Yeah. And he kind of hit on that exposure is kind of king when it comes to helping your children discover what their gifts and abilities are, because that's really what homeschool parents should be doing, right? Is just trying to expose our kids to all different kinds of things. I had a child who said that she wanted to be a vet.
Yeah.
And I mean, she knew it. She was like, I want to be a vet. So we arranged for her to go and spend a couple of days shadowing a vet. It took her exactly 6 hours to say, nope, never mind. I don't want to be a vet. We exposed her to it. She didn't like it. And she moved on. She looked for something different. And I think that's a lot. It seems to me like that's kind of where your passion is to say, hey, let's expose these kids to STEM. Let's expose these kids to this technology and to this idea of beginning engineering, and see if they might have a bent toward it. Is that?
Yeah. No, definitely true. And your example is perfect because even if after they've tried it, they don't like it, that's a win. That's a
Yes,
success.
100%.
That's a year of college they don't have to spend pursuing a
Yeah,
major.
they
They're going
saved
to
an awful lot
decide
of money.
they want to change. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it can do either one. Just giving them the opportunity. I mean, you don't know you like to play football until you get to play football and you get hit a couple of times. Maybe you love it, maybe you don't, but you won't know till you try. And that's a big part of what I think STEM is, and that's a big part of what I try to do. I want to go back though to something that you said in the beginning about overwhelmed parents.
Yes.
Because I see kind of two things. There are the parents who sort of know they need to give their kids these opportunities, but they really don't know how to get started. And like you said, they're overwhelmed. Then there are the others who are like, well, I did really well. I don't know any of that stuff, so my kids don't need to know that either.
Right.
So
it worked for me.
So STEM, for those who don't know, science, technology, engineering, and math, it's an acronym, but it also is a bit of a buzzword. And it's getting thrown around a lot by different companies because it's the hot thing right now. You want everything to be a STEM project. And so for parents who don't have a background in technology or engineering, that's often hard to sort of separate the really good STEM resources from those that are just putting a label on it. So if I could give maybe just two quick examples. First of all, there are STEM projects, they'll say STEM on them, maybe a box, a kit that you're going to put together. And one of the projects I use in this example a lot is a water bottle rocket. It's like, you can make this water bottle rocket. It can be part of your science study of the space and astronomy and all this other stuff. Well, the problem with that particular project is that often it's really not much more than cut out some construction paper, glue it on as fins, take markers or paint and decorate your rocket so it looks like a rocket. Well, you haven't really done any STEM. All you've done is art. And so I call that crafty STEM. That's where you have a project that's really trying to be STEM, but it's not much more than just a craft.
Well, that's what you see at Walmart.
Yes.
Like when you're
the little
going
tin
to get
can robot, you
yes.
put a battery in it, and yes, you do have to assemble that. There's a few screws you have to screw down, and there's instructions you have to follow, but it doesn't require you to know anything, and you really don't learn anything in the process of having put that robot together. But if you go back to that water bottle rocket for a minute, if you then design or have the kids design some way to actually launch it, maybe a foot pedal that when you stomp on it, it propels the rocket up into the air, and you see how long did it fly or how far did it fly. Then you take what you've observed about it and you start manipulating your design a little bit. What can you do to the fins? Maybe a better nose cone, maybe more weight, less weight. Answer those kinds of questions and try again. And what effect did all those things have on your rocket? Now you've taken that craft project and you've turned it into something that is a STEM project.
That's cool.
One more quick example. So there's another kind of category of STEM projects where you're really not combining more than one subject area. So you've seen these kits where you buy a greenhouse. You're going to grow your own garden, right? Well, that's biology. That's life science. That's just science. That's not really STEM. STEM is when you integrate, it's an interdisciplinary approach to multiple subject areas, which is more like real life. We don't separate subjects in real life the way we do in school. So these grow your own garden, it's just science. But if you also now have to do hydroponics and you got to figure out how you're going to put a water pump and some kind of a moisture sensor to see whether it needs more water, and some kind of special ultraviolet light so that you can grow it indoors rather than outdoors, and maybe some heater. Now you've turned it into a STEM project because you're incorporating a lot of other types of engineering into how can I make my garden maximize its output.
So that's the integration that you were talking
That's
about.
Exactly.
You're saying
project-based.
I wonder if, like, a word I would use, maybe you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. I feel like this is like to me, the word that comes to my mind is holistic.
Yeah.
So you're not just looking at one aspect, like the garden. You're taking kind of a more of a 35,000 foot view, and you're saying, I'm going to add this and this and this and this, and you're integrating different things into your garden.
Yeah, and I think that this is sort of natural for homeschool families anyway. They do this in their other subject areas already. They're incorporating reading and writing with other things so that you're not like
it's a
you're going to
unit
sit
study.
down. Exactly. You're not going to sit down and do, reading for 30 minutes and then you're going to just forget reading entirely and you're going to do math for 30 minutes. It is more of an integrated approach. But as we were saying earlier, these are specialized subject areas. And so it's not something that everybody just automatically knows how to do. And the things that we don't know how to do, we often shy away from. And so we don't bring those into the integrated homeschool environment the way that we do with the other areas that maybe we're more comfortable with.
Well, and it seems to me like homeschool parents really have an opportunity to have their kids excel in these areas, partly because the schools have just kind of fallen flat, and partly because they have the opportunity to really engage with their children and expose them to these ideas when they're young. I hear the acronym. I mean, we hear STEM a lot here at the Homeschool Resource Center. We have lots of STEM classes. What about STEAM and what about STREAM? Because there's more. Every time I turn around, it's like, here's a new acronym for you.
Exactly. And so there are some people who believe that, all right, so we do STEM. We've been doing STEM for a long time, but now we are emphasizing the technology, the engineering, the science, the math. We are de-emphasizing certain other subject areas. So what A does to STEM is add the arts, and that's where we get STEAM. So that science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. So an example of a project that might be STEAM would be where maybe you're doing a painting, but the design of the painting is somehow incorporating mathematical concepts like symmetry or something else from geometry. Then that's a specific part of what you're trying to convey through the painting that you're creating. Or maybe you are doing a sculpture and you want it to move. You want it to be an animated sculpture. So now you've got to have an armature that is not rigid as we would think of in an actual sculpture. And we have to have motors and ways to control the motors and things like that. So it's taking the technology, the engineering, and incorporating them into something that is more traditional fine arts. Music, electronic music, where you're composing and maybe you want the computer to randomly generate some musical notes as part of your composition.
So it's really, I mean, it's expanding it and just adding.
It is
adding to it.
And I'll talk about STREAM, and then I'll come back and say, well, I don't think it's really that important that we really add these extra letters. So STREAM is STEAM plus reading. All right. Now, why the person who, and see, this is where I think.
Aren't you already reading?
Yes, that's my point. and why do we not have to have a W? Where's writing?
Writing.
Right? If we call out reading, why don't we also call out writing?
Yeah.
And so that's when I think we've taken it a little bit too far, because reading is just something we do. We don't explicitly do it as part of any kind of a project. It's just sort of naturally assumed it has to be there. Same as writing, same as thinking. All of those things are part of what we do in every aspect of life. So this to me is somebody who thought they could be clever and throw another letter in and get a whole new word. Because, when you get to STREAM, you're really just back at school.
Well, you could do streams and put an S on it, and then you could add spelling.
You still got to get the W in there somewhere.
Okay, I'll work on it. I love a good acronym.
So I'm not in the camp that believes that if we say we're doing STEM,
it's redundant.
We are not doing arts or we are not doing reading. I think that you have to do reading to do STEM. And there's nothing that says that just because you're doing STEM, you can't incorporate an artistic component to it.
Right. Absolutely not. So why do you think it's important then that kids get a STEM education and that parents, I think the bigger thing is I'm really trying to get a hold of parents here to say, hey, listen, you can expose your kids to this and you should. What do you say?
So I think that, number one, if you have a child that they already know they want to be a technologist or an engineer or work in some kind of a STEM field, that's just they're driven that direction, then you need to be sure that they are prepared with fundamental concepts and strategies and tactics that are going to benefit them as they go into those fields. So what does it mean to have a project plan? What does it mean to talk about requirements? And these are, it's getting That's getting a little maybe more technical than you'd be when you start, but at least exposing them to what those things are and the vocabulary that they'll be using. So you're building a foundation of fundamental concepts and principles so that when they get to their advanced classes in high school or start off in college in their first year computer programming and engineering classes, they don't feel like it's a whole foreign language to them. They've already experienced some of this. So preparation for somebody who already knows, they want to go in that direction, I think is a really important point. But let's say, let's say you don't have somebody who's either undecided or they think they don't want to go in that direction.
That's my next question.
So there's a couple of things there. First of all, the things that we learn by doing STEM projects are transferable. They call them 21st century skills, and they include things, I've mentioned these already, but problem solving, logical reasoning, algorithmic thinking. It's taking a problem and breaking it down into a series of steps that's going to allow you to solve that problem. We have to do that all the time. You know, you get in your car, you want to drive to the store, but there's construction. And now you have to figure out how you're going to get around the construction. And you have to take the knowledge that you have of the area, maybe get some assistance from your GPS, to sort of get around the construction so that it doesn't prevent you from achieving your goal, right? The more that we can do that in a variety of different contexts, the more prepared we're going to be for all that life throws at us. And there are those kinds of problems that you have to solve in computer programming or in engineering type projects, where you've just got to figure out how to make it work. So even if you decide you don't want to go into a field where you do those things, the fact that you've had the opportunity to go in and experience the challenges and the obstacles and think your way through them to find a better way, or to find a way to make it work, all of that is going to be tools in your toolbox, you know, so that when you get, even in a non-technical context, you're faced with a problem, you've had some exposure to trying to figure out those things. But I would also push back on a parent, especially a parent of a young child who says, my kid doesn't want to be that. You know, they don't want to be an engineer. How do you know that? How do you know they don't want to be an engineer? There are studies that show, and this is a really broad range, but between 30 and 80% of college students change their major at least one time, which means that by the time they get there, they still don't know what they want to do. So even your 8-year-old who says, I'm going to be a whatever, by the time they get to college, they may change their mind. And so if you get into college and you decide, hey, this STEM stuff looks pretty cool, maybe I should check it out, but you've never done it before, you are already behind all the other people who came to college knowing they wanted to be an engineer or a computer programmer or whatever. So if you can at least expose them early, as we were talking about at the beginning, you have the opportunity for them to say, I like this, where maybe they didn't know they liked it before. And you're also giving them the skills to help prepare them so that when they are ready to decide, this looks like maybe something I should check out, they don't feel like they are 4 or 5 years behind everybody else. I would add too, that there are benefits that we don't necessarily associate with maybe computer programming that I think you can learn from computer programming. So I would say that computer programming can make your child into a better writer. And that might seem like it's at odds, because what does programming have to do with writing? Well, computer programming is really a foreign language, like any other foreign language.
Absolutely true, yeah.
You have a grammar, you have a syntax, and you have rules, punctuation that you have to use correctly. And even more, you have to use it exactly correctly. You tend to have a smaller vocabulary, so you have to pick the right word. There's not synonyms. There's one word that will work. So you learn to pay attention to word choice. You have to use the punctuation correctly. You have to spell and capitalize correctly. Because if you don't do all those things just right, your program will not work. So it's my opinion, I don't have any research to back this up, but it's my opinion that if you learn to pay attention to those things in that context, then you're going to pay attention to those things in any context that involves writing. You're just going to be more attuned to the things that make your program correct. And now your writing is also going to be more correct.
So when do you recommend parents start to expose their kids to a STEM education?
So with the programs that we do, we try to start around third grade or so, 9 years old ish. And that's because that's the point at which we feel they can begin to use the computer somewhat independently. They have the motor skills to use the mouse. They can use the keyboard to some extent, hunt and peck. But they can do it independently. They don't need a lot of hovering, to have your parent involved at every step of the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's where I would probably start. There are programs and resources that you can use with younger students, but I don't necessarily know that you have a lot of benefit from that. I don't think they're any necessarily better prepared than if the student never saw a keyboard, until they were 9 years old.
Right, right. Well, you obviously, clearly you're passionate about this. And I think that's what it takes if you're going to sort of ignite a fire under a student. I'm curious because a lot of this stuff I'm assuming is online.
Oh, yes.
Now you got a whole different, now you got a parent going, hey, come on, my kid, I don't want them on the computer. They're on the computer too much. What do you say to that parent?
Yeah. So being on the computer too much is a definite issue. There's a study by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry that says that children between 8 and 12 years old spend about 4 to 6 hours on the computer a day. Or on a screen, sorry, not necessarily on a computer, but using a screen. And that teenagers might spend as much as 9 hours on their screens.
Oof.
So
Ouch.
It's important for parents. Obviously, we don't want their kids to be on the devices that long every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's unhealthy for a number of different reasons. But we have to recognize that the answer is not, all right, we're going to just ban all screens, all
Right.
technical devices, because then your kids aren't getting the skills
That's not
they
the
need.
world that your kids live in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we can differentiate between productive and unproductive screen time. So unproductive screen time is most social media, video games, television. Those are things we're not really learning anything. We're just vegging out. We're just sitting and spending time on our device, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we have productive screen time. Productive screen time. And so that's things like learning to manage your files in an online cloud-based document storage service like Google Docs, doing email in a productive context,
Mm-hmm.
programming, as I've said. So there's a lot of things that we can do that will help our kids that involve technology to some degree, screens. So I think it's important that we separate the productive screen time, try to maximize that, and try to minimize unproductive screen time. I think that unproductive screen time can be used as a brain break. We all know that we need to sort of take a break from our work every now and then. And some people might love to play a video game for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, because that's how they chill out. That's how they relax. Or it could be used as a reward. You do all this stuff over here, and then you get some time on your device to do whatever you do that you want to do that's fun. But just having your kid spend every idle moment on social media or playing a video game, that's what we have to cut back on.
Are you concerned at all? It comes to my mind because I just answered a question from a listener about ChatGPT the other day and AI and all the things that are, the technology is changing so quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And it almost seems like if you don't start to learn or at least get your foot in the door now, that's a runaway train.
Oh, definitely. And so, first of all, AI is here to stay. Like you said, we just got to learn to make it effective. We got to learn to use it productively. I don't think we're at a point where AI is, we're at risk of having AI take over our society and be the one making all the decisions for us. And I don't think it's going to let me say this. It is going to change the landscape of future careers. There are some that are going to be less important, but there are going to be new opportunities that involve AI that don't exist right now. I'm a programmer at heart, and so I hear a lot of people saying, yeah, AI is going to make programming obsolete. Nobody's going to have to be a computer programmer anymore because AI is going to write all the programs for us. Well, we first have to understand what AI does well and what it doesn't do so well. AI, in essence, for those who really don't understand how it works, it's a pattern matching system. It looks at historical data, things that have already happened, and tries to match all of the things that have already happened with whatever you're asking about right now. So if I'm asking a question, AI is going to try to find all the times a question like that has been asked, take all of the answers and try to find some pattern in those answers and say, well, 80% of the time when a question like that gets asked, this is the answer to that question. So that must be the answer that you're looking for. And that's what they spit back out. When it comes to programming, there are parts of programs that get written over and over again, but most programs are like one-off things. You do them once. We don't write the same program over and over and over again. It might have parts that we've written before, but not the whole thing. And so I don't think AI is going to be ready now, certainly, to write an entire program. Further, when you test a program, you have to kind of know how it works internally to know how to test it effectively. And the bugs most often are in what are called the edge cases or the boundary areas, the places where it does this up to a point and then it's supposed to stop and do something else. That's the part that most testing should focus on. Well, AI isn't necessarily very good at focusing on that one little part. And so the program that they write or it writes might not handle those boundary conditions very well. So we're still going to need people who know more than the AI to check over the work that the AI spits out to make sure that it's doing all the right things.
Do you think it's always going to be that way?
No, I think it's going to evolve, but we're going to evolve with it. And I think there will always be a point where there needs to be a human who is smarter than the AI to check over the work the AI does. Did you know that AI can hallucinate?
What?
Yes. So I don't understand this as a programmer. There's two parts of AI.
AI's from Portland. I bet you the Portland ones could hallucinate pretty good.
There's two aspects of AI that as a programmer, I just don't get. I don't understand why it works this way. All right. So the first is hallucination. If you ask AI, ChatGPT, a question and it doesn't have a good answer because it doesn't have a body of knowledge that it can pull from and synthesize the answer to the question, it will make something up. There are examples.
It's a Democrat.
There are examples of where AI has come up with books that were never written by people who don't exist, and it will give you a full synopsis of this book that was never written. There is actually a famous example of some lawyers in New York who were using ChatGPT to write their legal briefs. And they were submitting them to the court, and they weren't doing very much review of them. Well, the clerk of the court is responsible for reading all those briefs and checking all the citations and making sure that it really backs up the claim, and then the clerk writes a little summary for the judge, and that's how that works. But so these lawyers were using ChatGPT to write their briefs, and it was making up court cases that had never been tried. And so the clerk found that these citations are all just bogus citations, and the law firm got sanctioned by the court.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I don't understand it. I don't understand why a programmer, whoever is in charge of how AI works under the covers, why can't you program it to just admit it doesn't know?
Right. I told you. I already told you. I think I figured out where it's coming from.
The other part of AI.
Get to the root.
The other part of AI that I don't really understand is that it tends not to be very good at math. You can give it math involving great big numbers or really small numbers, and it will just mess up the answer. And so again, as a programmer, I don't really understand why it can't recognize
that seems like it'd be basic.
This is a math problem.
Right.
I'm a computer. I know how to do math. I don't need to go onto my AI to do math. I can fall back to being a dumb computer and do the math part myself. I don't get that. But there again, math tends to be, if we're looking at it as a pattern matching system, where it's trying to find a question that was similar to the one that you're asking now, but you're asking it about numbers that have 15 digits in it because you just wanted to stump it, that's probably never been asked before. And so that's just not a good way to do math. So yeah, those are just areas where, today's AI, it sounds like it does all these really cool, amazing things. And there are some really amazing things that it can do, but there's also some pretty basic things that we have to be careful of. And that's another area where the more knowledge you can give your kids about things like this, the better able they're going to be to navigate their future where AI takes a bigger and a bigger role. And that's something else that I talk about sometimes. So big tech, right? Big tech tends to be opinionated. The things that you see online tend to have an agenda or a perspective associated with them. And so some people say, oh, I don't want my kids exposed to all that misinformation or whatever. And everybody's definition of misinformation, of course, differs. But, I'm going to just stay out of it because I don't want to be involved in that. Well, that just means that the people who are pushing those agendas and those perspectives are going to have even more power because you've removed yourself
100%.
As somebody who has an opposing viewpoint. So what's the best way that you can prepare your kids is to teach them how that stuff works and equip them to be the ones who go to work for Google or Facebook or Meta or whoever, so that they're the ones who get to decide or influence the algorithms that decide who sees what you want them to see and how often do they see it.
Well, that is infusing a biblical worldview into your kids. I mean, I am, ad nauseum here at the show said a million times, Christians belong in every sphere of influence. We belong in entertainment. We belong in the sciences. We belong in politics. We seed these territories and then we wonder why they're being run by, godless people who don't share our values. And then they use these scientific advances for evil instead of for good.
Yeah, definitely.
And we need God's people involved. You've done something really cool over at Excalibur Solutions, and I want our parents to hear about. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy is our program for homeschool families. We create projects. So they can be computer programming projects or electronics projects or 3D modeling projects. Some of our electronics projects even teach kids how to solder so they can put their own circuit boards together. But we create these projects and then we make the projects available as a series of video lessons. So you log into your account, you pick what project you want to do, and it guides you step by step through the whole process. So this is great for those parents who don't feel comfortable being the one supervising their kids' STEM education because they don't know how to program a computer or they don't know how to do engineering or electrical engineering or things like that. We take that role for you. We actually guide the kids step by step from nothing at the beginning all the way through their finished project. Projects can be 2 hours worth of content, or they can be 7 hours worth of content. Just depends on the complexity of the project itself. But we do, like I said, computer programming from a tool called Scratch, which is a free tool developed at MIT. It's a
we teach Scratch here at the Resource Center.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So it's a block-based programming language, which means, so for those who don't know, when you first learn computer programming, you're really trying to learn two skills at one time. You're learning a whole new language, but you're also having to learn how to decompose a problem and put it into a sequence of you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. So you're learning how to think and you're learning a language. The way programming is traditionally taught, where you're trying to do both things at once, it's overwhelming. Educators call that cognitive overload. So we're trying to ingest too much at one time and we just shut down. So what Scratch does is lets you focus on the thinking side of it, what's called the algorithm, the ordering of the steps, and not focus so much on the language, because all of the instructions that you need are these little color-coded puzzle pieces. You drag them over, they snap together, very little typing. You can always find the instruction you need. You never have to remember what the keyword was or how to use the punctuation or whatever. So it's great for people who have no programming experience. Doesn't matter if they're a young child or an older child. We have a project that's Scratch that is our version of the old Asteroids video game. And even though it's written in Scratch, it uses some trigonometry, so applied math, to move the spaceship. You have to what's called decompose the vector, which is the direction it's traveling and the speed, into how far is that on the x-axis and how far is that on the y-axis. So we do some Scratch, we do some Python, we do web development. And even though today most people build web pages with drag and drop tools where you don't actually see the code, in my experience,
like the kind of the WYSIWYG editors and things like that.
Yeah, Wix and Squarespace and those sorts of things.
Yes.
In my experience, they never look quite like I want them to look. It's like, oh, if I could just move this over just a little bit.
You could have such a great conversation with my husband because he is a computer programmer, and he's developed for the Homeschool Resource Center, has developed a registration system that just, the thing is amazing. And I have discovered that I am not a computer programmer. He's like, Heidi, I just did this thing. I'm telling you what, I look at that page of code and my head explodes. And I'm like, oh, listen, here's the thing. I don't want to know how it works. I just want it to work. Yes. Right. And so the parent that kind of has that same attitude that Heidi St. John has, right? It's a language. It's definitely a language. I don't have the brain space or the bandwidth to understand how it works. I just want it to work. And I want my child to learn how it works. They can actually plug into Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy, and they can learn how it works. And the parents then have given them access. They've given them the exposure to that particular thing.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I love that. What grade does it start at? Are you back to third grade?
Yep. That's why we believe that's the good age to work with.
Does it come with, so, I mean, obviously, programming is the computer, but if you're doing like engineering projects and things like that, then are you giving the parents, like, here's the list of things that you need and here's where you can go get it? Or can they buy a kit from you? How does that work?
Yeah, a little of all of the above.
Okay.
So for engineering projects, maybe an electronic circuit, there's actually 3 different ways that we do those types of projects. One is using another online tool called Tinkercad. Tinkercad is a 3D modeling tool. It's created by a company called Autodesk, who makes AutoCAD, which is an industry wide.
AutoCAD's been around forever.
Oh, yeah. Tinkercad is sort of a low-end version of AutoCAD. It teaches the basics of 3D modeling and so on. And that's its primary purpose. And we have some projects that do teach 3D modeling with Tinkercad. But we also use a second mode inside of Tinkercad, which is virtual electronic circuits. And so you can actually get what's called a breadboard, which is a little plastic block that you plug things into. So there's a virtual version of that, and you have virtual LEDs and resistors and buzzers and buttons and all sorts of things. Even a virtual Arduino, which is what's called a single board computer. And it's a way to control your circuits. So you can have a virtual version of that. So here you need nothing but a Tinkercad account, which is free. You don't have to buy anything else.
That's cool.
Now, if you like Tinkercad, your kid loves putting these things together and they want to physically assemble it, we have projects where we tell them that go to Amazon, buy one of these 3 kits, and you can reuse them for lots of different projects, because when you're working with a breadboard, it's all reusable stuff. You can disassemble it, reassemble it, and whatever. So for those kinds of projects, we just point you to Amazon and tell you what to go buy. But we have a couple of projects where we are actually selling the kit. These are the ones where you solder them. Mm-hmm. And what you get is a bag of actual parts. So a printed circuit board, the LED, the resistors, the capacitors, everything that you need. And we go through lesson by lesson how to physically solder all those components, while we're also telling you what the components do and how the circuit works.
That is really cool. If people had, like, I'm thinking, I can't help it, I'm thinking of the homeschool cooperative model. Like, if you wanted to teach this class in a co-op setting, can you do that through Excalibur?
We can. As a matter of fact, we do actually. So I have 2 different personas when I go to conferences. I go to school conferences and I go to homeschool conferences. In the homeschool conference, we talk about our self-paced, self-directed video lesson series, which you can do at your own pace, and it guides you step by step through every, just with videos, pre-recorded videos. But we also teach interactive classes at a number of private schools where they don't have an on-staff computer science or engineering teacher. So I'm teaching a web development class this semester and a robotics class. And I have another instructor who's teaching a Scratch class. We can do those same kinds of classes for a co-op model. At a private school, it does tend to be every day, but at a co-op, it could be once a week or once a month or whatever, with some self-directed activities in the interim. So, maybe we meet once a week and then they get a part of the project that we want them to complete by the next week. And then we'll get together again and answer the questions and go over whatever problems they have. And we can do that all virtually through Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, which that is another aspect of STEM education that is transferable to the real world, because often we just expect that kids will know how to use Zoom or Google Meet, the first time they have to have a virtual conference. But if they've never done it, then they don't know how to share their screen.
That's right.
Or,
yeah.
How to mute themselves or turn the camera on and off.
Right. Or you're like that guy in the court case, and he turned himself into a cat and couldn't turn it off.
Yeah.
Dude, that's still one of my favorite things on the internet.
One of the other things that we can do in a co-op model, I mentioned that I teach a robotics class right now. So we could actually serve as what's called the mentor in a robotics context, and we work with it's called First Robotics. It's an international organization where teams get together and build a robot, and then they go to competitions.
Oh yeah, we did that at the co-op. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and the kids love it. The kids really love it. Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. We did that for years when our kids were younger. It makes me wish I was raising my kids again, because I think what you're doing that's so cool is you're taking the guesswork out of this and you're making it accessible to parents who maybe didn't have an interest in, or if they did have an interest, just didn't know how to teach it. Robert, if people are interested in finding you online, what's the best way that they can reach out to you?
So our website is probably the best way to find us, stem.excalibur-solutions.com. And you can find there our programs for schools, for homeschools, for enrichment, and a form. You can contact us through there. Our email address is there. So
I love it. I hope there are lots more. I have such a passion to see Christian kids, or in particular out of the homeschool movement, get out there and dominate these fields and do it for the glory of God. You know, we're teaching our kids, whatever you do, it should be done to the glory of God. And the sciences and applied science, engineering, oh man, you know, it'd be amazing if we saw more Christian kids go into these fields.
It's God that makes it possible for all of us to understand any of this.
Yeah.
You know, all of what we do is governed by some natural laws, gravity and speed of sound and speed of light and that. But we couldn't do anything with that if we hadn't been imbued with wisdom and knowledge, and all of that comes from the Creator.
Yeah, it's so good. A couple of weeks ago, I had Jeff Williams on the show, and he's an astronaut. And we were talking about, you know, all the time that he had spent in space and sort of how he got interested in it. And his love of learning and his love of space really started when he was a child. And I think we have an opportunity right now to expose our kids to these ideas. And you guys are just doing an amazing job there. Robert Walsh, thank you for coming on the show with me today and diving into this topic with me. And I'll definitely be linking back to all the stuff in the show notes today. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Enjoyed being with you, Heidi. Thank you.
You're welcome. For more information on my guest today, you can head on over to HeidiSt.John.com. You guys, I'm going to do what the new page, I think, HeidiSt.John.com/mentions, so that you have a really quick and easy way to get to the links and to find Robert. If he talks too fast, or if you're like, wait, what did he say? Go to HeidiSt.John.com/mentions, and we will put it there as well. I hope this has been encouraging and enlightening for you. Guys, your kids belong in every sphere of influence, and that includes the sciences. And I hope that you will take advantage of this. And I can't wait to see what God does with it. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I will see you right back here again at the intersection of faith and culture.